I never expected to stand inside the Galactic Council nexus. I was a field biologist, not a diplomat, yet I found myself watching hundreds of civilizations debate a mystery that had unsettled the entire galaxy. Across the chamber, holograms listed expedition after expedition that had vanished on the infamous Deathworlds. Scientific teams, military patrols, and exploration fleets had simply disappeared. Then the final statistic appeared: human casualties, 3. A restless murmur spread through the delegates. They suspected hidden technology, genetic enhancements, or secret military support. None believed humans survived through ordinary means. The council speaker called for silence before announcing a multinational scientific expedition to Kharon Prime, one of the most lethal worlds ever catalogued. Its purpose was simple: uncover humanity's secret. I remained quiet at the back of the chamber. Scientists learn more by listening than speaking. As accusations filled the hall, our ambassador calmly activated her communicator and said only one sentence: "Send Ethan Walker. He'll explain it better than anyone." The council wasted no time. Within 2 days, the investigation was approved, funded, and assigned the highest scientific priority. Every major empire contributed specialists, believing the answer would finally expose whatever advantage humanity had concealed for decades. As I listened to the announcements, I realized nobody considered the possibility that our explanation had always been truthful. They simply refused to believe it. That certainty worried me more than the mission itself. The expedition roster grew longer every hour. Xenobiologists, behavioral ecologists, military observers, geneticists, and artificial intelligence experts joined the project. Several governments insisted on sending intelligence officers disguised as scientists. Officially, they were there to guarantee transparency. Unofficially, they expected to uncover forbidden technology hidden beneath human research equipment. I found the suspicion almost amusing, although I never said so aloud. Our destination was Kharon Prime, a world infamous for swallowing expeditions without leaving recoverable evidence. Towering forests hid predators larger than armored transports. Rivers contained microscopic parasites capable of dismantling nervous systems within minutes. Even the atmosphere demanded constant attention because airborne spores reacted violently to sudden movement. The planet had earned its Deathworld classification honestly, and every veteran explorer treated its name with quiet respect. During the final briefing, delegates repeated the same question in different forms. Why were humans almost never among the missing? Was it superior equipment, hidden implants, classified medicine, or military intervention? Each theory sounded more elaborate than the last. No one suggested the answer might involve behavior instead of technology. I remained silent while the debate continued around me. Experience had taught me that nature rarely rewarded arrogance. Every predator, no matter how powerful, survived by observing before acting. Perhaps intelligent species should have done the same. As the meeting ended, I collected my notes and prepared to leave for Earth. Before anyone could understand Kharon Prime, they first had to understand the people who walked into places like it without expecting the universe to bend in their favor. By the time I arrived at the Council's departure terminal, every delegation had already gathered around the expedition vessel. Distinguished scientists wore ceremonial uniforms covered with medals earned through centuries of research. Military observers stood beside them in polished armor, while autonomous drones floated overhead, recording every introduction. It looked less like a scientific mission and more like the opening of an interstellar summit. Then I heard my name. Ethan Walker? I turned and raised a hand. The council clerk looked at me twice before checking his datapad again. Field researcher? That's right. Human representative? Also correct. His expression suggested he expected someone older, perhaps decorated with honors or accompanied by an entourage. Instead, I carried a weathered backpack, a field notebook, and a small case containing biological sampling equipment. My boots still bore stains from my previous expedition on an ocean world where the local wildlife considered boats an invitation rather than a barrier. Several delegates watched me with poorly hidden disappointment. That's him, one whispered. I expected a military officer. I was told humanity was taking this investigation seriously. So was I. I pretended not to hear them. Years of fieldwork had taught me that first impressions usually reflected the observer more than the subject. The expedition commander, a towering Solari named Ambassador Kellyan, approached with measured steps. Mr. Walker, he said politely, we anticipated a larger human delegation. Our Federation believed one researcher would be sufficient. Only one? One listens better than 10. His crystalline eyes narrowed slightly, unsure whether I was making a joke. Around us, crates of advanced equipment were loaded into the transport. Motion sensors, combat drones, atmospheric analyzers, armored exploration vehicles, and enough defensive systems to invade a small moon filled the cargo bays. Every civilization had brought the best technology it possessed. I looked over the growing mountain of machinery and quietly wondered how much of it would still be functioning after the first day on Kharon Prime. No one asked for my opinion. That was perfectly fine with me. Nature had a habit of introducing itself without my help. The first official briefing began shortly after our transport cleared the council station. Every delegation gathered around a circular table where holographic maps of Kharon Prime rotated above us. Red markers covered nearly every continent, each one representing a previous expedition that had vanished. The atmosphere was heavy with expectation. Every scientist believed this meeting would reveal humanity's hidden advantage before we even reached the planet. Ambassador Kellyan invited each delegation to summarize its working theory. One after another, they proposed increasingly complex explanations. Some believed humans possessed classified cloaking devices that confused predators. Others argued we carried undetectable pheromone emitters or neural implants capable of suppressing aggression. A military observer even suggested humanity had secretly engineered itself through genetic manipulation generations earlier. Every theory relied on technology. None relied on observation. When my turn finally arrived, every eye in the room settled on me. I stood, activated the display showing Kharon Prime's dominant predators, and waited until the whispers faded. You, researching for secret technology, I said calmly. The truth is much simpler. The room became completely silent. Predators always notice more than we think they do. Several delegates exchanged puzzled glances. I enlarged an image of one enormous native hunter. You believe surviving a Deathworld is about carrying bigger weapons. Another image appeared. It isn't. A third predator replaced the second. You survive by understanding what the animals believe they seeing. The silence lasted only a moment before quiet laughter spread around the table. A philosophical answer? Someone muttered. So the human secret is confidence? Another delegate smiled politely. Surely there is a scientific explanation. There is, I replied. Observation is science. I closed the display. When we land, leave the armored vehicles behind whenever possible. Don't fire unless there is absolutely no alternative. Watch the wildlife before you try to control it. The laughter grew louder. No one agreed with me. But everyone remembered exactly what I had said. VidIQ. The discussion ended with polite applause, but it carried no respect. As soon as the briefing room emptied, I heard the conversations begin behind my back. They were not whispered carefully. Most delegates assumed I was too far away to notice, while others simply did not care whether I heard them. The human avoided every direct question. He must be protecting classified technology. Or he enjoys making fools of us. One military observer laughed. Imagine believing a creature that has survived by instinct instead of engineering. I continued walking through the corridor without responding. Every expedition I had ever joined included someone convinced that nature could be dominated by equipment alone. The universe had a reliable way of correcting that belief. Usually, it did so without mercy. Later that evening, the senior scientists gathered in the observation lounge overlooking the stars. Holographic simulations of Kharon Prime rotated above the central table while autonomous systems compared thousands of biological records. I accepted a cup of coffee and listened as new theories appeared almost every minute. One researcher argued that humans emitted invisible chemical signals. Another insisted our heartbeat must produce frequencies that frightened predators. A third proposed that Earth's gravity had altered our muscles in ways scanners could not detect. None of them suggested the simplest possibility. Predators were excellent observers, better than us, perhaps better than any intelligent species had ever admitted. Ambassador Kellyan finally approached me, carrying a tablet filled with expedition schedules. "Mr. Walker," he said, "despite the skepticism, the Council has agreed to test your recommendations during the initial landing." I expected they would. "You don't sound surprised." "They, scientists. Curiosity usually defeats pride, eventually." He studied me for several quiet seconds. "I hope your confidence is justified." "It isn't confidence," I answered, looking toward the distant stars where Kharon Prime waited beyond known trade routes. "It's experience." For the first time since the mission began, Kellyan said nothing. He simply nodded once, as though a small part of him had started wondering whether the answer everyone sought had been standing in front of them from the very beginning. When the transport reached the outer edge of Kharon Prime's system, every delegation hurried toward its laboratories. Sophisticated scanners filled the corridors with shifting holograms, while military analysts calculated defensive formations for the landing. I headed somewhere much quieter. The Human Federation had converted a small cargo compartment into a temporary research room. There were no ceremonial banners or expensive machines inside, only maps, field reports, worn notebooks, and a handful of specialists who understood that surviving dangerous places began long before anyone touched the ground. I spread decades of expedition records across the central table. Every failed mission was marked with the same pattern: heavy vehicles, loud engines, aggressive patrol formations, warning shots fired within the first hours. Every decision announced the newcomers before they had observed a single native creature. Beside those reports, I placed studies of Earth's wolves, lions, bears, crocodiles, and great white sharks. Different worlds, different biology, familiar behavior. My colleagues compared movement patterns, territorial responses, eye contact, and reactions to unfamiliar animals. We were not searching for differences anymore. We were searching for instincts that survived evolution itself. Apex predators rarely attacked without purpose. They watched first. They judged risk before reward. Those that ignored caution rarely lived long enough to reproduce. By midnight, the plan was complete. We would leave the armored vehicles behind whenever the terrain allowed. Weapons would remain lowered unless every other option had failed. Every encounter would be recorded from beginning to end without interference. Most importantly, no one would run. Panic transformed uncertainty into pursuit faster than any sound. One of the younger researchers looked up from her notes. "So we trust the predators?" I smiled and closed my notebook. "No," I answered. "We respect them. There's a difference." Outside the compartment, the stars slowly disappeared behind the growing silhouette of Kharon Prime. Tomorrow, the Council expected to uncover humanity's greatest secret. I suspected they were about to discover something much older than humanity itself. The descent through Kharon Prime's atmosphere was far rougher than the simulations had predicted. Violent crosswinds shook the transport while crimson clouds flashed with silent lightning around us. Every impact echoed through the hull, reminding us that this world resisted every visitor before they even reached its surface. Around me, the alien teams checked weapons, activated shields, and confirmed emergency extraction routes for what felt like the 10th time. I simply watched the forest below. From above, it appeared almost peaceful. Endless canopies stretched toward the horizon, broken only by black rivers and towering cliffs. Yet every scanner aboard the transport painted a different picture. Thousands of moving heat signatures drifted beneath the trees. Most were predators. Some were so large that the onboard computers classified them as terrain until they moved. The landing ramp lowered with a metallic groan. Warm air rushed inside carrying the scent of wet soil, unfamiliar pollen, and something faintly metallic. It smelled alive, not pleasant or unpleasant, simply alive in a way that demanded attention. The scientific teams deployed exactly as planned. Armored vehicles rolled onto the clearing. Reconnaissance drones climbed into the sky. Automated defense turrets unfolded around the perimeter. Every civilization trusted its machines before its instincts. Our human group carried only recording equipment, sampling kits, and emergency supplies. No engines, no unnecessary noise. For nearly 2 hours nothing happened. The forest remained strangely quiet, as though every creature already knew we had arrived. Then the motion sensors erupted with warnings. Massive lifeforms approached from every direction. The trees trembled, branches snapped, shapes larger than any Earth predator emerged from the shadows one after another, surrounding the clearing in complete silence. Several alien soldiers raised their weapons. Someone shouted for permission to fire. Before panic spread any further, I stepped forward, raised one hand, and spoke as calmly as I could. Nobody moves. Every eye turned toward me. Then the first predator walked into the clearing. The creature stepped out of the trees with slow, deliberate movements. Standing nearly 4 meters at the shoulder, it carried itself with the effortless confidence of something that had never feared another living thing. Thick black fur covered powerful muscles, while rows of pale scars crossed its neck and flanks like old battle honors. Its golden eyes settled on me first, never blinking, never rushing. Behind it, another emerged, then another, until nearly a dozen surrounded the clearing without making a sound. Around me, I could hear quick breathing inside sealed helmets. Weapons tracked every movement. Targeting systems chirped impatiently, waiting for permission to fire. One nervous soldier shifted his footing, and the nearest predator immediately turned its head toward the sound. It had noticed the movement before anyone else did. "Stay exactly where you are," I said quietly. "Lower your weapons." "No sane creature ignores a charging predator," someone whispered. "It isn't charging," I replied. "It's deciding." The lead animal continued walking until only a few meters separated us. Every instinct buried deep inside my mind urged me to step backward, but experience spoke louder than fear. Predators recognized uncertainty. Retreat invited pursuit. Panic completed the invitation. I kept my breathing slow and my posture relaxed. I met the animal's gaze without challenging it, letting my eyes remain steady instead of darting across its body. The forest had become completely silent. Even the insects seemed to be waiting. The predator stopped. For several endless seconds, neither of us moved. Then it lowered its massive head slightly, inhaled once, and quietly turned away. One by one, the others followed. Within moments, the clearing was empty again. No attack, no warning, only fading footsteps disappearing into the ancient forest. Behind me, nobody spoke. The only sounds came from helmet cameras still recording and sensors desperately trying to explain what every pair of living eyes had already witnessed. No one moved for nearly a minute after the predators disappeared. The clearing remained silent, yet the tension lingered like a storm that refused to break. Around me, helmet displays flashed contradictory readings. Threat indicators still painted the surrounding forest crimson, while every visual recording showed the same impossible outcome. We had stood unprotected before the planet's dominant hunters, and they had chosen to leave. Finally, someone found their voice. Why didn't they attack? No one answered. Instead, every scientist began reviewing their recordings. Frame by frame, they searched for hidden signals, invisible transmissions, or equipment failures. They found nothing. The predators had simply observed us, reached a decision, and walked away. Our survey continued deeper into the forest. Several kilometers beyond the landing site, we discovered ruins hidden beneath enormous trees. Massive stone pillars rose from the earth, covered with symbols untouched by time. Whatever civilization had once lived here had vanished long before the first starships crossed the galaxy. Yet inside the largest structure, our scanners detected preserved data crystals still protected by autonomous systems that somehow continued functioning after thousands of years. Hours later, The translation software produced its first complete records. The archive contained observations of Kharon Prime's wildlife made by its ancient inhabitants. Generation after generation, they had documented every dominant predator on the planet. One chapter immediately captured everyone's attention. It described creatures that survived by avoiding unnecessary battles. According to the records, apex predators instinctively assessed confidence, posture, and behavior before attacking. Creatures that displayed calm movements, unwavering attention, and complete control were rarely considered prey. They resembled fellow hunters rather than victims. The instinct had evolved over millions of years because attacking another dominant predator carried unacceptable risk. The chamber inside the ruins became completely silent. I looked around at the stunned faces. "We didn't teach them anything," I said quietly. They were already making that decision. For the first time since arriving on Kharon Prime, no one laughed at the human explanation. VidIQ. We had barely finished documenting the ruins when the alarms erupted across every communicator. Unknown vessels had entered the atmosphere without filing any approach signal. Seconds later, the first explosions echoed through the valley. They weren't military ships. They belonged to illegal poachers, criminals who crossed protected systems to capture rare predators for private collectors. They had tracked our expedition, believing our presence had revealed the safest route into Kharon Prime's wilderness. Their landing craft crashed through the trees, scattering debris across the clearing. Armed figures rushed forward carrying stun cannons, containment nets, and heavy plasma rifles. They ignored us completely. Their eyes were fixed on the enormous predators moving between the trees. To them, the creatures were merchandise, nothing more. "Take the largest one alive," their leader shouted. Several alien security officers raised their weapons, but they were caught in the open. Before anyone could organize a defense, the poachers opened fire. Brilliant flashes lit the forest as energy bolts slammed into ancient trees. The entire valley shook with terrified roars. Then something unexpected happened. The lead predator stepped between me and the attackers. It wasn't alone. The rest of the pack emerged from the forest, spreading into a defensive line without hesitation. None of them faced me. Every eye remained fixed on the poachers. The criminals fired again. The predators charged. What followed lasted less than a minute. Massive bodies crashed through armored vehicles, containment cages shattered beneath enormous claws, and the surviving poachers fled toward their ships in complete panic. Those that escaped abandoned everything they had brought. Silence returned almost as quickly as the attack had begun. The largest predator looked back at me for only a second before disappearing into the trees with the rest of the pack. No celebration followed, only disbelief. Every helmet camera had recorded the impossible. As the recordings uploaded automatically to the Council network, one sentence appeared beneath the live transmission. Aliens kept asking why humans are never hunted, until they finally learned the truth. When we returned to the Galactic Council Nexus, no one greeted us with applause. They greeted us with silence. The recordings from every helmet camera had already spread across the Council network, and for the first time in living memory, the chamber was completely still before a session even began. Delegates who had once dismissed my explanation now watched the footage frame by frame, searching for evidence of hidden devices, secret signals, or invisible weapons. They found none. The Council's Scientific Commission spent 3 uninterrupted days examining every second of our expedition. Independent laboratories analyzed our equipment, uniforms, and biological samples. Military specialists reviewed the predators' behavior from dozens of camera angles. Artificial intelligences compared our movements with millions of recorded encounters between predators and prey across known space. Every investigation reached the same conclusion. Humanity had concealed nothing. No classified technology, no genetic manipulation, no biological pheromones. The predators had reacted naturally. Their behavior matched instincts refined over millions of years, and human posture, confidence, controlled movement, and steady eye contact had activated those instincts exactly as the ancient archive had described. One by one, the old theories collapsed. Delegates who had demanded investigations now quietly withdrew their accusations. Others admitted that they had mistaken understanding for superiority. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy's deadliest worlds with stronger weapons. We had survived because we had learned that nature could not be intimidated into cooperation. As I stood beside Ambassador Torres, I watched the chamber from the same place where I had first listened in silence. This time, the whispers carried a different tone. They observed. They adapted. They respected the predators. For the first time since humanity joined the Council, no one spoke about us as though we were reckless newcomers. They spoke about us as researchers who had discovered something the older civilizations had forgotten. Sometimes the greatest advantage was not the ability to dominate nature. It was the wisdom to understand it first. The Council expected humanity to celebrate. Some delegates even anticipated a speech about vindication or proof that we had been right all along. Instead, Ambassador Torres stepped onto the central platform with the same calm expression she had worn before the expedition began. There was no triumph in her voice, only quiet certainty. "We did not come here to prove that humanity is better," she said. "We came to understand why so many lives were being lost." The chamber remained silent. For generations, the galaxy has treated Deathworlds as enemies to be conquered. Every failed expedition followed the same pattern. Arrive with overwhelming force, assume every creature is a threat, and answer fear with violence. Kharon Prime has shown us another path. A new hologram appeared above the platform. Instead of military charts, it displayed thriving ecosystems, migration routes, nesting grounds, and protected habitats. The Human Federation proposes the creation of the Galactic Predator Research Alliance. The name echoed through the chamber. It will unite scientists, conservationists, and survival specialists from every member civilization. Its purpose will not be to tame dangerous worlds, but to study them, preserve them, and teach future expeditions how to coexist with the life that already calls them home. Delegates looked at one another in surprise. There was no demand for territory, no request for political influence, no attempt to claim Kharon Prime as a human discovery, only an invitation to learn together. The first delegate to stand was Ambassador Kellyan. The Solari Union supports the proposal. Moments later another representative rose. Then another. Within minutes, the entire chamber was on its feet. The vote was unanimous. For the first time in the Council's history, every civilization agreed on a single scientific initiative without amendment or negotiation. As the approval was recorded, I looked toward the enormous windows overlooking the stars. We had traveled to Kharon Prime searching for a secret. Instead, we had rediscovered something much older than civilization itself. Respect was the first step toward survival. 5 years passed before I returned to Kharon Prime. The planet looked exactly as I remembered it, yet everything around it had changed. The military checkpoints were gone, replaced by research stations built to blend into the landscape rather than dominate it. Landing zones had been reduced to the smallest possible footprint, and every expedition now arrived under strict conservation protocols developed by the Galactic Predator Research Alliance. Scientists from dozens of civilizations worked side by side. Some tracked migration routes through the forests, while others studied communication between predator packs or monitored fragile ecosystems that had once been disturbed by armed expeditions. Soldiers still accompanied each mission, but they carried their weapons as a final precaution rather than a first solution. The predators remained exactly as they had always been: wild, powerful, unpredictable, yet attacks on research teams had become extraordinarily rare. New explorers spent months learning behavior, posture, and observation before ever setting foot on a Deathworld. Every lesson began with the same recordings captured during our first expedition. My helmet camera had become required material in military academies, scientific institutes, and survival schools across known space. Cadets no longer studied it as a remarkable human achievement. They studied it as a reminder that knowledge often protected lives more effectively than force. As I stood at the edge of the same clearing where everything had begun, I saw a familiar shape emerge between the trees. The great predator was older now. Fresh scars marked its shoulders, and gray streaks colored the fur around its muzzle. It stopped several meters away, watching me with the same calm golden eyes I remembered. Neither of us moved. After a quiet moment, it turned and disappeared into the forest without a sound. I smiled to myself. Some things did not need words. Some forms of understanding were stronger because they had never depended on them. Kharon Prime had become the galaxy's greatest wildlife reserve, proving that even the deadliest worlds could remain wild without remaining misunderstood. The closing session of the Galactic Council was quieter than any before it. The elder representative of the Solari Union slowly rose and looked around the chamber before speaking. For years, he said, we searched for the secret of humanity's strength in their weapons, their ships, and their technology. He paused, letting the silence settle. But the truth was something entirely different. His eyes met mine. Humans learned not only how to survive among predators, they learned how to understand them. He looked toward the stars beyond the great windows. That is why even the deadliest beasts in the galaxy rarely see humans as prey. No one applauded. No one needed to. Some truths were too important for celebration. They only deserved to be remembered.